Space, the final frontier, and also one of the most harshest environments that humanity will ever endure. And this also goes for all the casuals that play the game. What's up, people? One Up Punch here. Taking a look at a game called Quasimorph I picked up for about $20 on Steam. And I'm going to talk about this game, in particular, the fun bits as well as some of the other things that people were having an issue with. And what I mean by that is when you go look at the reviews, a lot of people are bitching about the difficulty. I do find it hard, and I do find it obnoxious that some of these Quasimorphs will hit you through a wall, phase through this like floor and smack you in the face, or they'll just straight up beat the shit out of you because they can attack you 8 times. Does not mean you should go into the reviews of Steam and review bomb the living hell out of it, making the developers assume that everybody hates it. Because at the end of the day, it's a wonderful game, and I love Quasimorph. I picked it up specifically because I hated all the stupid-ass reviewers bitching and crying about the difficulty. Let me remind you of another game called Stone Shard, where you review bombed the living shit out of that game, and they still sold 20,000 copies, so highly recommend the review bombers literally piss off, because Quasimorph is and should be difficult, just like another game I played called Underrail, where that game was incredibly hard, but the crafting system was incredible, and being able to do the different combat mechanics, that was a turn-based strategy. This is kind of similar to that vein, but more towards Stone Shard, because when you press a button to walk, your character will do it turn by turn, or seem like you're doing it turn by turn, with different actions of like shooting your firearm, healing yourself, and choosing the different types of run speeds that you have, which you have stealth, which is a crouching type of walking, then you have a normal type of jog, then you have a full-blown sprint, but watch out with the full-blown sprint, because if you do decide to do that, the inventory will, if over-encumbrancy happens, not allow you to run. And that will play a huge role when you're going and dealing with combat. For example, there are some enemies in this game that will just one-shot you, or, like I said earlier with some of the Quasimorphs, morph from a human to a Quasi, and smack the ever-living shit out of you until you die. For example, there's a Quasimorph in particular I remember called Malik, where it's a floating green little blob, and if he gets a hold of you, he will smack you 5 times in a row, and then you'll just, die, and you won't be able to do anything. So I highly recommend that you have high armor and high HP, because if you don't, and you can't heal yourself fast enough, you're going to die and go right back to your station. Which, if you do not know, after your death, you will lose everything, including all the equipment that you had on your person, compared to another game called Zero Seafort, to where you keep your primary guns on your actual person, but lose everything in the backpack. This is more of the hardcore way of, if you go into whatever game with, like, an SMG that's a TT Storm, or you take a Silenced Eagle pistol, you're going to lose it if you don't get to the evacuation point, which is calling on the radio or getting to the elevator. And those are the other ways of getting out of a specific mission, which there are a couple of. For example, they have espionage, they have, I think one was conquest, elimination, and they have different factions on the specific planets you go to, like Venus and Mars, and sometimes the moon will have, like, one about a space station that you have to find, like, a specific Quasimorph and capture him. The combat, like I said, kind of similar to Stone Shard, to where you click on an area and your guy will move, kind of seems like turn by turn. You have different actions of shooting a firearm, and the different actions of that gun having secondary effects, like full auto, high beam. I think the shotgun had like a jackhammer version to where it was firing 3-round bursts. So there's different ways of the guns having their own alternate fire as well as their primary. And then you have the different things with the knives. For example, they have 2 classes. They have the Scouts of Hades and the Blades of Eclipse. And the Eclipse blades essentially have high, like, passive performance with knives, while the other one is mostly best with guns. And then the game has a reloading mechanic to where if you do reload your gun, you have to wait a couple turns before you could use it again. So highly recommend moving backwards by full-blown sprinting away, because the enemies will murder you in this game pretty fast. Speaking of getting shot at or shooting at people, there's also a mechanic with this health monitor to where every time you get injured, you're going to have a fracture, a splint break, bleeding, or, having to take care of yourself. Otherwise, again, you will die. And that could be from getting hit by a Quasimorph melee attack, getting shot by a shotgun, getting blown up by shrapnel, a bunch of different ways of getting killed. So the only way to do this is that if you click onto the health monitor, it'll pop up with a screen that shows like your body, the different parts like the leg, the arm, the head, the torso, the feet, and you have to heal with specific things like bandages, splints, medical glue. There's also Dr. John's med kit that will allow you to heal anything instantly, and they'll have the different potencies there to, of course, heal your character. This is what it looks like here. On the right side of the inventory, it'll show what you have in there to use. You'll click on that, then click on the wound that you have to deal with, and then you should be good to go. However, there are times that if you're running around too fast, you will open up the wound again and then have to put it back on with a bandage and walk slowly. You go too fast, it'll open up, infect, and then if you don't have antibiotics and it reaches 100%, you start taking more damage and then probably taking more double damage from other enemy units. So highly recommend watching out when you're dealing with the Quasimorphs and enemies, because there are a shitload of humans that you have to deal with in a lot of these different areas. For example, prisons have a lot of human prisoners. Then they can also become Quasimorphs, so they can change different things. The problem with the Quasimorph is that when it becomes fully born into the world, it goes into something called a phase shift, and it becomes invulnerable to any damage for that turn. Once that turn's over, it'll be into the reality that you're in, and then you can shoot the shit out of it until it dies. And that's how essentially a Quasimorph would work in game. Like I said, I have no issue when it comes down to the difficulty, but there is some annoyances I have with, of course, the game being early access. There's going to be bugs and problems. For example, there's a Quasimorph that is a, not really the Malik one I was talking about earlier, but screw him because he's an asshole. There's another one that looks like a shadow or a shade, and he could smack the shit out of you so hard he knocks you back into a wall, and sometimes it'll glitch you and instant kill you. Other times it broke both my legs, my arm, and I couldn't move for about like 15 specific seconds, or like it was reduced by 15 movement. So watch out when you're dealing with him, because if he gets in melee range, he will just smack the living hell out of you like a fly. And then of course you have the bodies. You can pick up their weapons, from armor to backpacks to specific firearms and ammo that they have. They have the different tablets you can go through too, by going through 1 all the way up to 9, depending upon how many bodies are there, so it's a lot easier to access. You could disassemble firearms, being able to get trash and different components to make things at a workbench, crafting different things from armor and weapons to maybe more antidotes and different types of ammunition. And like I said earlier, the 3 different movements, which is sneak, jog, and run. Very situational in dealing with combat. For example, there was an enemy in the game called an AR, which is a robot that has different things. Metal pipes, the worst one's the jackhammer, and another one that has essentially a prismatic pistol. And if he gets in range with you, he will stun lock the shit out of you until you die. But that being said, in closing, about Quasimorph, I truly believe that this game is worth the $20. I put about 4 or 5 hours into it, and even though I keep dying constantly, you could still refresh the game by starting a new game and then going all over with brand new equipment. But anyway, I've been One Nut Punch, and this has been another video. Thanks for watching as per usual, and I'll see y'all later in the next one.